So, covering the awrah. You have two important perspectives here. One is with what, and the other is how much. I see to start with how much, with what will probably blend in there. Well, let's look at scenarios. Let's start with the scenario that you are all alone and you're not praying. You're all alone. You are in privacy and you're not praying. So this means there's two things that's going to matter about how you're going to pray. How you're going to cover. There's two things that matter concerning your obligation of covering. One, are you alone or there's someone in your presence? And then the question would be, who's that? So depending on who that is, there's going to be rules for what you have to cover. If you have to cover or not, and if so, then how much? And the other one is, are you praying? Because prayer has own rules for covering, besides whether you are alone or not. So let's start with being alone and not praying. Then what's the awrah? The awrah of the man in this case will be his front and back privates. And the awrah of the woman will be what's between her navel and her knees. That's the Shafi'i school. When I say that's the Shafi'i school, I mean to say this is obligatory. Doing less than that requires a reason in the Shafi'i school. Nudity in privacy, pointless nudity in privacy is a sin according to the Shafi'i school. Not by consensus. And looking at one's own private parts is disliked. Okay, so the man will cover the front and back privates, and the woman will cover between her navel and her knees. Let's focus in on the man here. When you say the front and back privates, then these words do not include the thighs on the side. So how would he, is the rule the way it's stated, or what? The rule is the way it's stated. The front and the back the rule doesn't say the sides. So what this means is, if he had two cloths, one that goes down the front, one that goes down the back, and a string held these two cloths up, and from the side you could see his thigh, this is not haram. And according to some, this is sufficient. I'm talking privacy now. According to some, this is privacy here. This is not a condition for privacy. According to some, this is sufficient. The awrah is covered here, according to some of the men. Right? So that means this is less than underwears, because the underwears will cover the sides. Brief ones, the brief underwears. From the side, it's less. But in the front and the back, it's going to be longer, probably, most likely. Okay. In the presence of the spouses, as you know, then the cover is not required. Then that's a reason. Shafi'is, they said the pointless nudity in privacy, that's a sin. And what's a reason? They said the least reason is enough. Doesn't have to even be an emergency. What's a reason? The reason is changing your clothing or bathing. Though it's possible to bathe with an izar, but it's not obligatory. And cooling off. Now, according to the Shafi'i school here, in the presence of another, a man in the presence of someone other than his wife or unmarried slave woman, Then he needs to cover between his navel and his knees. Not including the navel, not including the knees. Except whatever makes him achieve everything in between the navel and the knees. Then here, the obligatory covering of a man does not go beyond this amount for anyone else. For anyone. This is the most a man is obligated to cover between his navel and his knees. Whether he's praying or he's not praying when in the company of others who cannot see his awrah. So there's two levels of awrah. There's what's called awrah mughalladha. Yani the mughalladha means thick, dense. So as if it means something like the ugliest part of the awrah, the most abominable part of the awrah. So in privacy, it's like I mentioned for you. In privacy without a reason, and in the company of others for a man is what's between his navel and his knees, whether he's praying or he's not praying. Yeah, the severe nudity. Now, for the woman in the presence of others without praying, then we have to see who are these others. So if those are other Muslim women, then the maximum she's obligated to cover is between her navel and her knees. Or if those are non-marriageable relatives, males, so not including the cousin, then the maximum that she's obligated to cover is between the navel and the knees. If she's in the presence of a non-Muslim woman, then she covers most of her body. Yani, in fact, let's come back to the non-Muslim woman before her. It's easier to put her last. So now she's in the presence of marriageable men, or if she's praying, if she's in the presence of marriageable men, or if she's praying, then she must cover all of her body except her face and her hands. And the rule for both genders is from all directions except underneath. And we're talking about a free woman here, free woman, not a slave woman. Hmm. And then there's not more of her body that she's obligated to cover. Therefore, saying that she's obligated to cover her face is wrong. Even if Imam An-Nawawi said so, rahimahullah ta'ala, it actually is a blunder. It's not correct. And the saying that she's obligated to cover her hands is irregular. Irregular. Irregular means it is wrong. But irregular means there's an ijtihad about that from a mujtahid. Ahmed said she's obligated to cover her hands. This is irregular, meaning it's against the evidence. So it's not taken. And it, in fact, does not prevent the consensus from concluding. It's still valid to say there is a consensus that the woman is not obligated to cover her face or her hands. When it comes to the face, yes, consensus. Because Imam An-Nawawi is not a mujtahid. When it comes to the hands, you can say it's a consensus that she's not obligated to cover her hands if you count the saying that she's obligated to cover her hands is irregular. If you count that as irregular, it means like you're disregarding that saying. And then you're going to say there's still a consensus. If you say there's no consensus that she's not obligated to cover her hands, the meaning would be that you are regarding the mere fact that a mujtahid said otherwise, not that it's necessarily valid saying. What's correct is that she's not obligated to cover her face and her hands. We don't have time now to go into the proofs, but we can next time, especially if you ask me. What if she's in the presence of a non-Muslim woman? Then she covers. Then she does not uncover except what she would uncover if she were working in her house. Like she uncovers her hair and exposes her neck and rolls up her sleeves. Maybe she would roll up her pants legs. Not more in front of the kafirah. For we fear her betrayal. We fear the betrayal of the kafirah. Who would then go and describe that Muslimah to whom she does not want her description exposed. Okay. Now, with what? With something that blocks the color. What's very, very important word I just said right now? When I said with something that blocks the cover. What's most important word here that I just said in that sentence there? Three. Yeah, I can say it one more time. I said, with what is the cover? The cover is with something that blocks the color. What's the most important word right there? Three, two. You said color. What someone else said? Color. Someone said block. No. Most important word here is something. Maybe the word something for you meant clothing. But the word something does not mean clothing. So then what has to be something that blocks the color? What's like that? Mud is like that. What else is like that? Body paint is like that. And other things. Like, what else is like that? Like a shower curtain. A shower curtain is like that. Or what else is like that? Yeah, like a door. A door is like that. Or like, what else is like that? Like water with a film on the top of it. Like has moss. If you stand in the water, let's say you stick your head out and the rest of your body can't be seen through it. Or leaves. Leaves are like that. So now you understand very well. That's fiqh. That's knowledge that the Prophet taught, alayhi salatu wassalam. So let me leave you with a case or two. One, if you don't have enough clothing to cover, let's say there's a man and a woman, and between them there's not enough cover, whatever is the cover, there's not enough cover for both of them, then who gets priority here? The woman. The scholar said the nakedness of the woman is more urgent to be covered. And what's another thing? Another case. Mas'ala. What if you are in the same room with someone who needs to change his clothing? And then if you're going to stay in the same room, then what you need to do is raise a barrier. Even if you raise the barrier with your own hands. So like take a sheet, take a shawl, a rida, and raise it, spread it. Raise your arms with your hands apart, spreading this thing. It's a screen. You're raising a screen. And it's sunnah, in this case, to put the screen behind your back. So it means the person is changing. You have your back to this person and you're holding up a screen too. That's sunnah. Then it's not haram. And closing your eyes is not enough. And turning around by itself is not enough. So the sister said, a door? Question mark. So yes. So for example, a woman is in her house. She has on an izar, let's say. Izar goes between navel and the knees. So her aura is covered. She's in her privacy. Someone knocks on the door. A man knocks on the door. Does she have to go and cover herself? No. There's a door there. So her aura is blocked. Yani the color is blocked. In some books, they say skin and hair color. But, yani, if you say it conceals the color, then still same thing. Okay, and we saw examples of that. What is the limit of concealing the color? At what point is it counted that the color is not covered or concealed? When you can tell dark skin from light skin. If you can perceive dark skin from light skin through this cover, then it's not sufficient. I think that's clear. If you want to ask, you can ask. So some things are sheer, so light, but they might have color. What if it has color? What if it's purple or something? This is enough because her skin is not purple. If you were to look, you're gonna see she looks purple. So is this enough? We can't see her color. It's purple. No, it's not enough because you can tell dark from light. Like for example, if you could see the difference between the shade of the nipple of the breast from the rest of the breast. So it means you can see dark from light. Then this is not enough. And also, we just said right now, the condition is that the color is concealed. What about shape? So what's correct is that concealing the shape is not obligatory. And there's a lot of documents from the scholars about this case. This is for men and for women. Rather, concealing the shape is recommended. And the scholars said, no matter what you wear, something of your shape will appear. Whether that's the breast, whether that's the rear, etc. This is also for men. His chest, his arms, his legs, his etc. So this is not obligatory in itself to conceal the shape. Rather, the obligation is to conceal the color. And the recommendation is to conceal the shape. We already talked about that it's not obligatory on the woman to cover her face or her hands. Does anyone know the evidence from the hadith? Or you can give me any evidence. I really am curious about the hadith though. Anyone knows the evidence that a woman is not obligated to cover her face? You can give me what you know. 5, 4, 3, 2. So yes, the woman that was asking about Hajj for her father. Uh, okay. To be honest with you, I didn't know this is the same hadith. I don't know. Maybe you know what I don't know. There is a hadith about a woman asking about Hajj for her father. The hadith I'm referring to, that I want to refer to, is called the hadith of Al-Khat'amiyyah. Al-Khat'amiyyah. This means the lady from the tribe of Khat'am. Khat'am. This lady is the one who came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in the authentic hadith narrated by Al-Bukhari and others. While the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was riding an animal and his cousin Al-Fadl was behind him, and Al-Fadl was fine and she was beautiful, and they liked each other because they were looking at each other. And the Prophet ﷺ turned his cousin's face. He took him by the chin and turned his face away from her. So where's the evidence here? The evidence here is that the Prophet ﷺ did not command that woman to cover her face. Instead, he turned his cousin's face. Had it been obligatory on her to cover her face, he would have told her to cover her face. Now, there's a whole discussion here. So this is what we say. This hadith is evidence. Had it been obligatory on her to cover her face, he would have told her to, alayhi salatu wassalam. So someone would say, what? She was in Hajj. In Hajj, the woman cannot cover her face and she cannot wear gloves, remember? So therefore, he didn't tell her to cover her face. Okay. So, and one of the big scholars said this answer too. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani said this answer. And this answer is, mashallah, it's not strong. Not that Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani was saying the woman has to cover her face. I'm not saying that. He said, well, if you use this hadith as evidence, there's still the question of how he would have told her to cover her face when she's in Hajj. That's what he said. That's not really a question, though. That's why I said it's not strong. It's not really a question because there's answers for it. So it means there's no question here. Yani, 1. There is no evidence in the hadith that she was in a state of ihram. State of ihram. You have to get into the state of ihram to do hajj. And then you do the rituals of hajj and you do what's called tahallul. That's going to get you out of the state of ihram. When you get into the state of ihram for hajj or umrah, then there's things that become haram for you. Like for a woman, she can't cover her face and she can't wear gloves as long as she's in a state of ihram. A man, he cannot wear stitched clothing as long as he's in the state of ihram. Until you do tahallul. Tahallul will undo the ihram. Unravel it. So there is actually no evidence in the hadith that she is actually in the state of ihram asking the Prophet this question, alayhi salatu wassalam, although that was during the hajj, because it's possible that she did the nusuk, the worships or the rituals, the religious activities that will release her from her ihram, especially when you consider the setting. That by the time you reach that stage of throwing the pebbles during the days of Tashriq, then it's good chance for someone to be out of state of ihram. Even if a person was throwing at Jamratul Aqabah, you might not understand what I'm saying at this moment. Even if a person is throwing at Jamratul Aqabah, if he threw there, then before the days of Tashriq, that means It's possible he got out of ihram right there, even before the days of Tashriq. You know, Hajj, yani, Hajj is a number of days. Those days include the Eid and 3 more days after them. And there's some days before. Uh, so when a person does certain things, he will get out of ihram, even if he's still inside these days. Even if it's before the days of Tashriq. The 3 days of Tashriq are the days for throwing stones in the daytime. So anyway, when you regard the setting she was in, then it's possible that she already got out of ihram. There's no evidence that she was in state of ihram. That's one thing. Number 2, he would have said to her, alayhi salatu wasalam, if it was obligatory on her to cover her face, but she was in a state of ihram, if it were obligatory on her to cover her face, had it not been for the ihram, then he would have told her, do like my wives do. Because the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were the believing women who are obligated to cover their faces. It's not an obligation on the other believing women. So what they had to do, they had to cover their faces, the wives of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, but in the state of ihram, they had to put something that sticks out, like some rods that stick out, so that a drape can come down without touching their faces. And like that, they will hide their faces without the veil touching their faces. And this way, they will do both obligations. Their obligation of covering in front of men their faces, and the obligation of avoiding the face veil during the ihram. So he would have said to her, do like my wives do, but he didn't do that. So this proves that she's not obligated to cover her face. And also, the scholars said, if it were obligatory on the woman to cover her face, then it would mean that the worship calls for her to expose her nakedness. Because for the Hajj, for the Ihram, it's haram for her to cover her face. And for the prayer, it's disliked for her to cover her face. It's recommended for the woman when she performs her prayer not to pray with the niqab. She should expose her face for her prayer. So, if it were obligatory on her to cover her face, then this would mean that the worships call for her to expose some of her nakedness. While really the worships call for covering the nakedness. So it's not obligatory on her to cover her face. And also, the scholars, they gave a reason. Reason is different from evidence. A reason is different from an evidence. They gave a reason why she's not obligated to cover her face or her hands. They said because she needs to be able to have those exposed. She needs to be able to expose those, not to have them exposed, but to expose them. They said the rest of her body, she does not need to expose it. She doesn't have a need for it. So she was commanded to conceal it. But her face and her hands, she needs to be able to expose those. So she was not commanded to conceal them. And the same reasoning goes for the awrah of the man. When we say his awrah is what's between his navel and his knees. Because he needs to be able to expose this. He's different types, not woman, he's man. Yani, one of our sisters, may Allah have mercy upon her, she passed away. She used to take care of the musalla. She used to say, Allah created men for work. Look at how He made them. Like she's saying, look at their built. Look how Allah built a man, a human male. He created them for work. That's what she used to say. While she's putting brothers to work in the musalla. Pick this up. Take that over there, etc. Rahimahullah. So he needs to be able to expose that. His chest, his back, his arms, his shins. And that brings me nicely to the last thing I'm going to mention here about the awrah, covering. Which is that it has to be from all directions except underneath. So, except underneath of what? Except underneath of the awrah, beneath, from below. What I like to draw attention to here in this case is the difference between from below and from the side. When you hear it this way, from all directions except underneath, you might not understand what's really meant here. For example, a woman has on a dress or a skirt, goes down to halfway past her knees, down, yani, half of her shin is visible. Half of her shin, you don't see it if you're standing in front of her. Yani, not unless, let me continue. And she has stockings. Her stockings go up over her knees. So she has on a dress or a skirt goes down past her knees. She has stockings that go past her knees. So if you are standing in front of her, you don't see any of her awrah. But if someone were to, how it would be coined. Look under her skirt, you will see her thighs. So in this scenario, her prayer would not be valid. She can't pray this way. Those thighs there, they need to be covered for the validity of the prayer. Because they are visible from the side. Visible from the side. Okay? Uh, okay, well, let's take a look at the man, though. Let's see if what I'm saying is consistent. A man, his awrah is between his navel and his knees for prayer and in front of people without talking in details. So, if he wears an izar, he seals this izar around his waist, around his midsection. He covers his navel. Maybe a little bit of his navel's still visible. Okay. And this izar goes down to past his knees. So now you're standing in front of him, you don't see his awrah. Okay. But if you just look, quote unquote, under his izar, you're going to see his awrah. His prayer is valid like this? Yes, his prayer is valid like this. How's that? Because the awrah of the man stops. Yani, let me say it this way. The awrah of the woman is what? All of her body. All of her body. Except the face and her hands. So, since her awrah is all of her body except her face and her hands, then when we say except from underneath, underneath of what? Underneath of what? Tell me. Except from underneath. Yani, let me repeat. If her awrah is all of her body, and we say she has to cover from all directions except from underneath, then the conclusion is underneath means underneath of what? 5, 4, 3. Correct. Underneath her body. Yes. Barakallahu feek. هكذا. Now, I think some other people also, they knew the answer. But you hesitate. Why you hesitate? I say this is you're underestimating your own intelligence. So that the answer was really clear. But you say, what? Is it though? And then you hear them say, I knew it. You knew it. Okay, underneath her body. So then this means that's why there's difference. The aura of the man is not his whole body. So that's why it was possible for his aura to be covered down to a certain extent. And then if someone were to look under that cover and see his aura, his prayer still valid. When it comes to a woman, how would it be possible to see her aura from underneath, but not from the side? Like, you are on a platform, on a tier. It has grates. The floor of that tier is grates. Grating. This means you can look up and see from underneath. And this Muslim woman has a cover, a jilbab that goes from her head down to the ground completely. Completely. It's all the way down on the ground. If she were to bow or if she were to prostrate, it won't even lift off of the floor. So you cannot see her aura from any direction except unless you were to go underneath and under the tier where she was standing and look up. Then you'll be able to see under what she has is going all the way down to the ground, see her aura. Her prayer is still valid. I think it's clear. Therefore, if you can just put a mirror next to a woman's foot and see any of her aura, her prayer is not valid. She's not covered sufficiently. Her aura is not concealed sufficiently. Because next to her foot, not under, next to. If you could put a mirror next to her foot and see any of her aura, then her prayer is not valid. Wallahu a'lam. Allah knows best. Any question? Yes. Yes as in it's clear, or yes as in you have a question? Can you please repeat what the scholars said? Yes. The scholars have an illah, or the part about the animal. With destination and being the Qiblah, yes. If your animal takes you off course, then you have to bring it back on course immediately and will maintain your prayer. Your prayer will not become invalidated. Is this what you're asking about? It's like, for example, what if you were covered properly for your prayer and you were praying, then the wind came, blew up your cover, and your aura was exposed. So if you recover your aura immediately, your prayer is still valid. You're welcome. طيب بارك الله فيكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك